各位觀眾大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄精華回顧。疫情期間，聯邦政府推出加拿大緊急商業貸款，為小型企業減輕財政壓力。雖然聯邦政府已經多次押後還款嘅期限，但係疫情之後，特別係餐飲業界面對住高利息以及高成本嘅問題。卑斯餐廳及食品服務協會喺去年年底就表示，擔心卑斯省今年可能會有多達2000間嘅餐廳面臨結業。有業界東主就選擇結業，但係亦都有東主選擇喺逆市搏鬥。而一向係依靠小企業經濟發展嘅卑斯省，將會遭受到啲乜嘢影響以及挑戰呢？
俗語話：民以食為天，形容人民以食糧為生存嘅基本，對人嚟講非常重要。不過近年食物價格不斷高漲，面對困境唔單止係民眾，佢哋亦都喺逆境中掙扎。
I mean, there is absolutely a labor shortage right now. I mean, we're seeing it, everyone's seeing it. The labor shortage is due, there's just not enough people in Vancouver. Vancouver, a lot of the younger kids and a lot of the people with experience, both, they're just leaving because they can't afford to live here. So there's a lot of people who I had working for me who've gone to the island.
疫情之後，好多人都認為各行各業係時候有重新嘅機會，可以大展拳腳。不過餐飲業界面對嘅只有一次比一次更大嘅挑戰。
When we opened after the pandemic, business was strong, and I went, this is awesome. And then suddenly inflation, and then suddenly labor shortage. And we realized a lot of people that we thought would come back left for other occupations. They went into the gig economy, they went into healthcare, different things.
選擇留低嘅業界東主背後有啲咩原因要堅持落去呢？喺卑斯省溫哥華市擁有幾間餐廳同埋酒吧嘅 David Duplin， 呢一日一大朝早就嚟到市內位於 Mount Pleasant 明街嘅餐廳打點。佢話而家做咩都需要親力親為，面對嘅困難亦都越嚟越大。
Well, right now it's always difficult for restaurants and bars. We're always struggling. There's a lot of factors like, people's taste change, trends change. It's all due to the weather. I mean, there's a million different things with restaurants that make it tough to operate. We're very forward-facing and very reliant on customer interaction. And so the restaurant industry's never been easy, but particularly since COVID was insanely difficult. Like being shut down at all our spots and then the couple years afterwards of how to put it back together again and how to hire new staff, and it was really hard. And so we were finally starting to come out of it, and then we had the huge increase in prices and in prices and in cost of goods. All of that happened in the past year, plus the interest rates going up put a lot of financial strain on people. So what the result of all that is now it's super hard. Like it's been really, really tough for this past 6 months, a year. Like I've seen my numbers go down 20-30% just because people aren't going out, and at the same time there's a challenge because we're having to raise prices. And so yeah, it's been really hard.
卑斯餐廳及食品服務協會喺舊年年底話，預計喺今年春季期間，卑斯省可能多達2000間餐廳面臨結業。David 話，疫情期間亦都因為成本問題，需要被迫結束喺溫士華埠嘅一間餐廳營運。
Have you ever thought of close down just any businesses? If not, why do you still continue? Because is that you have a lot of passion inside this industry?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, it is. We all do this because we love it. That's why we're in the restaurant industry, because it's not a lot of money. Everybody thinks we make millions, and we really don't. I've got 5 different locations, and so in that way I'm doing better than I think some other people that maybe just have one, but it's a super challenge. And yeah, we do it because we love it, because it's the funnest job in the world. I actually had to close down a restaurant during COVID. I had this 200-seat restaurant in Chinatown called the Emerald, and there was just no way I could rebuild it with having to do everything else that I was having to do at the end of COVID, I realized that starting that one up again and getting all the staff, because it was 20 staff that worked there and managers, it just was too big a hill to climb, so I had to let that one go. So again, in that kind of situation, you got to be ready and got to be able to be as flexible as possible. I didn't want to lose that restaurant, but if I didn't, I could have lost everything.
除咗成本高昂之外 ，David 又話招聘工作亦都有一定嘅困難，最主要係勞動力不足，亦都有員工因為敵唔過生活成本，去到其他省份就業。
I mean, there is absolutely a labor shortage right now. I mean, we're seeing it, everyone's seeing it. The labor shortage is due, there's just not enough people in Vancouver. Vancouver, a lot of the younger kids and a lot of the people with experience, both, they're just leaving because they can't afford to live here. So there's a lot of people who I had working for me who've gone to the island or moved to different countries or moved back east because it's just so much cheaper. How we've dealt with the challenge of the labor shortage has been through creating a positive culture. So here I really give a lot to my staff. I give them a lot of bonuses. We have an extended medical plan. We have a lot of positivity and try to create a positive culture. And so in that way, I think it's really helped me retain a lot of staff by doing that. We have to work hard on being positive and being a good employer, because that's really what I think it takes right now, is to have staff that's happy and engaged, that want to be here, and in that way we can retain them. And in that way we get a reputation and are able to hire staff easier because people want to work here because they hear it's a fun place to work.
除咗要留住員工 ，David 話要留住顧客，亦都有一定嘅難度，所以佢亦都會為餐廳做定期裝修，去迎合顧客嘅口味。
Absolutely, it's a super challenging task to stay up with the times and stay up with taste. I mean, the key for me has always just been to be really on top of it. Like, you got to be involved and paying attention to what the customer wants and how your staff is and what the current trends are. And in that way, you got to be immediate about how you reflect stuff. And that's really difficult. And it's different than a lot of other businesses where they can plan change and do change over long periods of time. We have to be way more immediate. So like this restaurant, for example, Slim's, I opened it as a barbecue place during COVID, and it just wasn't working after COVID. And then I realized that I needed to create a vegan option for it. That a lot of people weren't coming into this place because there weren't enough vegan. It was too meat. So I changed the entire direction of the restaurant. And now we lean into all the vegan, all the vegetarian options. That's part of our whole slogan. It's for carnivores and vegans alike. And so in that way, we opened up a whole new kind of genre, and I was able to identify what the problem was, make a change, and then activate it. And that all had to happen quickly and changed our numbers. And now we're doing way better because of that. But that's exactly a great example of like having to pay attention to what's going on and change your plan immediately. And a lot of other businesses aren't like that. Restaurants are very temperamental, so they're really hard.
加拿大獨立商業聯盟數字顯示，喺疫情期間，超過5萬個中小企業申請咗聯邦政府推出嘅加拿大緊急商業貸款 CEBA。呢一份貸款嘅還款期限已經喺今年1月18號截止。喺截止日期之前仍然未能還款嘅企業，將唔會享有2萬蚊嘅寬免，甚至需要面臨每個月5%嘅利息。有業界團體就展開咗一個名為 Safe BC Restaurant 嘅活動，關注呢個問題，亦都向各級政府施壓業界面對各種問題。
I think we're going to see a lot of businesses fold as a result because they had to go out and do a couple of things. If they didn't have the cash to pay back the bank or pay back the government, then they owe $60,000. They weren't able to get the $20,000 forgiveness. Some of them went and financed it at very high interest rates, which is not good. And some of them just couldn't pay it, and now they owe the federal government $60,000, which has to be paid back in 3 years. I am really quite surprised the Prime Minister didn't extend those loans on this basis. And I think it's because he lives in Ottawa and it's a different world. But in British Columbia, we had, if you look at what happened last summer in the Okanagan, we had forest fires. We had restaurants that had no business for a week, a few days. We've had weather disruptions. We had all those disruptions. So this was never, the industry never said, we want you to give us money. What we wanted was the gift of time. We just wanted them to extend it. I think it would have been a better shot for the Prime Minister to extend it and help business recover more than it was to say no.
Ian Tosterson 批評喺現行嘅制度底下，政府冇一個專責為飲食業界設置嘅部門，令業界即使有唔同嘅意見，亦都申訴無門。
There are so many aspects, so many parts of government that work on our industry. There's a Ministry of Finance, there's a Ministry of the Attorney General, there is Ministry of Small Business, there's a Ministry of Labor, there's a Ministry of Health, there's the municipal governments, and everybody is regulating our industry, and there's no one in charge. There's no conductor. It's like having an orchestra and everybody's playing different songs. So what we said is, why don't we put all the issues in one menu? And then why don't we be able to go to anyone in government right now and say, you know what, here's the situation. How do we work together like we did during the pandemic to bring some clarity? And it's captured the attention of this was mailed to every politician in British Columbia, so they're all getting a hard copy. We had a big Zoom meeting last week with media, industry, and government. We had several hundred people on it, which we were really pleased about. And now we have a document that we can start to have some conversations with government to say, let's pick 2 or 3 things that doesn't cost a lot of money, but a lot of this stuff is vested in red tape and regulation, where the industry is just so over-regulated, and they can't breathe, they can't do. They're spending more time trying to do government regulation than serving their business. I think this is going to have a really big impact. I really do.
佢又話：餐飲業界正喺高利息同埋高成本嘅環境情況底下掙扎當中。佢警告未來可能會有更多餐廳因為咁樣而倒閉。
When we opened after the pandemic, business was strong, and I went, this is awesome. And then suddenly inflation, and then suddenly labor shortage. And we realized a lot of people that we thought would come back left for other occupations. They went into the gig economy, they went into healthcare, different things, because they had lived the life for 2.5 years of restaurants opening and closing. And then we saw the effect of inflation, which we had never seen before. In fact, what we saw before the pandemic was downward pricing on commodities because the world is stable, and suddenly now the supply chain pushed all the prices up. The big problem in this whole equation is that you and I are only going to pay so much for a restaurant meal. And so normal business would say, you know what, inflation is 8%, I put my prices up 8%. It goes up 5%, I add to 5%. Suddenly now you've got a $30 hamburger and no one wants to eat a $30 hamburger. So the result is that about half the restaurants in British Columbia right now are either losing money or they're breaking even.
有餐飲業界就期望政府能夠協助佢哋渡過呢一個艱難時期，咁喺高利息以及高成本嘅情況之下，諒解業界嘅難處。雖然加拿大緊急商業貸款係聯邦政府嘅政策咁但係省政府嘅層面又可以點樣伸出援手幫助小企業呢？我哋下一節翻嚟再睇。歡迎翻嚟節目時間。飲食業界東主形容聯邦政府喺疫情期間向小企業提供緊急商業貸款呢係一件好事。咁但係疫情過後，惡劣嘅營商環境接踵而嚟。一向依靠中小企業發展經濟嘅 BC 省，可以點樣同業界一齊去應對呢？
疫情期間，超過5萬個中小企業申請咗加拿大緊急商業貸款。喺溫哥華市中心近華埠經營餐廳嘅 Matthew 就係其中一位。佢話好多餐廳東主同佢一樣，正喺度同逆市搏鬥緊。
It's definitely tougher now post-COVID. During the COVID period, there were so many government support programs that helped with rent, that helped with labor, and during that period, a lot of those costs sort of increased exponentially. So as those support programs drew back, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of restaurants now tip into unprofitability. Basically, during COVID period, those government supports just kept a lot of restaurants alive. But now I think there's a lot of restaurants that are sort of fighting for their survival. So we have a different brand name for the pizza. So in the daytime we're called Honeybee, and the evening time we're called Thank You Pizza. So because it's the same room, we like to reset it. So in the daytime, obviously, there's no candles on the table, but yeah, we'll set it up with candles on the table, change the lighting, rearrange the seating a little bit, and then all the pizza happens in the truck out there. The pizza we added during the pandemic, yeah, that was a pivot.
Why did you choose pizza?
Well, at the time that we added pizza, there was no indoor dining. The whole world was takeout, and I couldn't think of a better thing that would work takeout than pizza. And I really hoped and I'd say I knew, but I hoped in my heart that, the regular world would come back, and I knew that pizza would work during the pandemic when it was takeout only, and then I sort of knew that the room would work for pizza when indoor dining came back. We're fortunate. We're not ones that are about to close down, but we're certainly ones that have seen what were two really profitable businesses shift towards, break even or slightly profitable businesses, which is a big challenge. And the reality is, closing down a restaurant isn't like quitting a job. We have leases that we're tied into, often with huge deposits. You have equipment that's often leased, personal guarantees, you have staff, you have, a lot of costs that are really sunk. And, anytime a restaurant closes in an unplanned way, it's usually a lot of friends and family loans. It's usually they haven't recouped an investment. Nobody does that by voluntary choice. That's really you run out of gas, on the side of the highway. And that's sort of the real challenge.
Matthew 認為新冠疫情除咗改變好多上班族嘅工作模式，亦都影響佢哋用餐嘅習慣。
I think there's two things. One is everyone's lives have changed since the pandemic. One of our restaurants catered almost exclusively to people who worked in offices. We sold coffee and lunch. People used to go to the office 5 days a week. People today go to the office 2, maybe 3 days a week. So it's a completely different dynamic. You see that in any downtown in any major North American city. And I think the other thing is, just in an objective basis, people are spending less. People have less money in their pockets, and consequently they're spending less in restaurants. So I think on a per capita basis, for the first time, I think in Canada, for the first time since 2008, adjusted for inflation, we spend less in restaurants per person than we did the year before. Obviously that does not bode well for restaurants, especially considering all the other factors, rising cost pressures from property taxes, just about everything you can imagine.
Matthew 話：聯邦政府雖然喺疫情期間推出緊急貸款，但而家需要小企業償還貸款嘅時機就唔係好啱。
There's two parts to that. Obviously the program was great when it happened, but I think what it did in effect was it buried a lot of COVID losses. You put them into this account that you almost didn't have to think about. So, for the time that we were paying rent and payroll when we had nobody coming through our doors and no indoor dining, that was all sort of in that CEBA account. And now that it's come due in effect because we've just basically shifted, in our case, from the Government of Canada loan to a loan with TD Bank. But now this loan has interest, and this loan has mandatory monthly payments, whereas the other one didn't. I'd certainly wished that perhaps they'd had an off-ramp, maybe you pay $20,000 this year and you maintain your forgivable portion and you pay $20,000 the year after, particularly for the restaurant industry, considering how, hard hit and really how the restaurant industry still hasn't recovered from COVID. Obviously, a lot of businesses have and are back to normal, but for some sectors, it's just not the reality. So, unfortunately, I think it's going to have a really bad impact.
Matthew 希望各級政府加大力度協助業界，考慮減低物業稅，又或者一啲嘅酒精稅。
I think at a minimum, I would say, do no harm. So we're seeing a property in both of our leases, for example, we pay 60% of property taxes on this building. Our property tax bill was assessed at 31% more than it was last year. That's a cost that our business is going to have to pay. When it comes to labor, there's a mandatory 6 sick days per employee, part-time or full-time. That's a cost that as a business we now have to pay. So it's government policy, but it's imposing those costs on businesses, and businesses that are really struggling right now to pay those costs. Even with liquor tax, we have a 4.6% increase in the liquor tax coming this year. Minimum wage, again, that's coming up, that's pegged to inflation. So, all of those cost factors, I think, provincially, federally, and municipally, are all making it harder for businesses to survive. So the more they can do to reduce those costs and reduce those burdens, administrative or financial or whatever they may be, the better.
現時喺卑詩省嘅中小企業超過50萬個工作職位，餐飲業界受到重挫，又會點樣影響一向依靠中小企業經濟發展嘅卑詩省呢？根據卑詩省政府數據顯示，2022年卑詩省嘅經濟收入中小企業就佔咗34%。雖然緊急貸款屬於聯邦政策，但省政府又有啲咩可以提供協助呢？
We're seeing worldwide inflation, a worldwide labor shortage, and the cost of borrowing money due to interest rates is very difficult. So it's really many factors that are leading to challenges in our small business sector and particularly hitting restaurants. So your question, what has government done and what can government do? We've been working closely with the restaurant sector. Some of the things we've done. When restaurants buy alcohol, historically, they need to buy it at the same price as you or I would. So we've changed that. The markup to alcohol is taken off, and they can now buy it at wholesale prices. We started that a couple of years ago to help them during the pandemic. We've kept that going. When I asked my team to look at how much money we've saved small businesses, they did the research, and the answer was $91 million. And that is money that small business restaurant runners, restaurant owners can put right back into hiring staff, covering food costs, and so on. We've also put a cap on delivery fees, which is very important because many of these delivery companies were charging outrageous fees. We passed a law that put a cap on those fees. We also made the opportunity to have patios, which was very successful during the pandemic. We made that possible for the future. So those are some of the things we've done. We also need to do more, and we've been talking with the Restaurant Association about that.
現時有唔少小型企業表示，仍然無法償還聯邦政府嘅緊急貸款。省政府有冇為佢哋申訴，希望再次延長還款期限呢？
We have been doing this advocacy. So I myself, a year ago, spoke to Minister Ng, and then when they put in a new small business minister, Minister Velazquez, I met with her as well to make these pleas on behalf of our restaurant sector and small businesses in British Columbia. They extended it for 1 year, but they have not extended it further. The Premier specifically spoke to the Prime Minister about this and advocated for additional extension, and they have not agreed to do it. So we'll continue that advocacy work, but we have not seen any indication that they'll go further than they are right now.
消費者嘅消費意欲疲弱，除咗因為物價高企之外，有顧客亦都認為北美地區嘅消費文化亦都會減低佢哋外出用膳嘅意欲。要點樣打破呢一個惡性循環？係咪應該仿效其他國家或者地區取消消費模式呢？
I don't think we can. There's been a handful of restaurants that tried to go, you know what, no tipping. But what they do is they put the prices up. And then they build in 20%. So say you've got a restaurant that had a hamburger at $15 and they were a tipping restaurant. And then that restaurant said, you know what, no more tipping. We're just going to make that burger now $18, but you don't have to tip. And what we found is that people didn't want to work. Like the employees didn't want to work because they loved getting their tips. The other side of it, or not the other side, but the other point is that in North America, we're a tipping culture. So when you take the ability for me to tip, I get frustrated because if I've had good service, I want to tip you. And suddenly you say you don't have to tip. And I'm going, no, but I want to tip. Now, I think the problem with tipping is that it's when you get a machine in front of you that says, well, you can start at 20%. I think that's wrong. I think, you get your first prompt is at 20%. Or you're in a non-restaurant environment, like, say, a private liquor store, and all they did was they put the bottle on the counter, and you get a prompt for do you want to tip 18%.
雖然業界提出勞動力不足係一個主要挑戰，但卑斯就業廳長貝雅麗對於呢個問題就表示非常樂觀。佢形容卑斯省嘅勞動力係全國最強勁嘅一個省份。佢又話喺2026年，溫哥華亦都有份舉辦世界盃等大型盛事，相信到時候有唔少遊客前往本地，刺激本地經濟。
First part is we are a destination of choice for people. Our population is expanding significantly. Last year alone, 150,000 people moved to British Columbia. People vote with their feet where they would like to live, and British Columbia is growing quite a lot. That's helpful to us in terms of the challenges that we face in our labor force. And so those numbers are very strong. In fact, at the end of the year, last year in December, we created more jobs in British Columbia than anywhere in Canada. And our labor force is growing quite strong. In regards to your question about major events, we have so many major events coming. This is a huge area of growth in British Columbia. I think you know that FIFA is coming, which is very exciting. There's also many other major events that are coming. The Invictus Games, there are a couple I can't share with you now that are going to be announced in the future. So very much so, British Columbia is a destination of choice for international events, sporting events, music events, and so on. So you'll see those continue to drive attention into the province. But importantly, we have to keep building housing.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。我哋嘅電郵地址係 mag26@fairchildtv.com。如果觀眾咧想上網重溫今集嘅節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站3w.fairchildtv.com， 點擊節目重溫一欄就可以睇得返㗎啦。下星期同一時間再同大家見面，晚安。